Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to see you all this morning. Alan is taking a day off today, so you've got Steve and me, Lynn, in charge this morning. It's lovely. It's lovely to be here. We've also got lots of people doing different roles today because Tom's away today as well. But we've got David on the keyboard. We've still got our Howard, and we've got Ian on the drums. We've got flute. Oh, you playing flute, Kath? So we've still got a band. And we've got Jordan multitasking at the back. So we've got an amazing team this morning. We're going to have a brilliant time. For any visitors, welcome. There will be refreshments at the back when we finish. And please do stay and enjoy those with us. Right, so just before we sing our first couple of songs, let's just bring the morning to God in prayer. Father God, we thank you for bringing us together as your people today. We've all had very different weeks, and our prayer this morning is that we are able to empty our minds of the busyness of our everyday lives, so that for this next hour or so we can be united in just focusing on you. Lord, we want to learn. Teach us this morning how to be more like you. Help us to understand and to become the kind of offerings that please you. Bless us, we pray, in our worship of you this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. So we're going to start with singing Cornerstone. Thank you, David. Okay, so, Elsie, we're going to hear a story about the Mr. Men again. And do you know what? You're not the only person who ever asks about the Mr. Men. I get lots of requests about the Mr. Men and what they're up to. And for anybody who's new here and wondering what on earth I'm talking about, I'm very fortunate because I know some of the Mr. Men, and they always want to let us know what's happening in Worle. Let us know in Worle what's happening where they live. And they always have a little message as well. So this time, Elsie, I caught up with Mr. Helpful, one of my very favourite Mr. Men. And I asked him how he was. And he said that actually he's had a bit of a difficult time. I said, well, why is that, Mr. Helpful? And he said, well, when everybody came out of lockdown, everybody was going about their lives as normal and joining things and doing things. And all my friends seemed to be really busy, and I couldn't see any of them. I was feeling a bit lonely, but they'd all joined these new clubs and got new hobbies. Mr. Tickle, apparently he'd taken up jazz piano. Of course, he'd be very, very good at that with his long fingers. And he was going down a storm down in the social club a couple of nights a week. And then Mr. Small, now you remember Mr. Small, he had all that success with his marrow competition last summer. So he'd taken that to heart. He'd bought himself an allotment and he joined the gardening club. So he was always down there digging. And then Mr. Quiet, who Mr. Helpful always used to rely on to go around and have a little chat with, well, he joined a reading group, the book club. So he always had his head in a book, or he was down the reading club. So Mr. Helpful was feeling a bit lonely. So he said, I know what I'll do. I'll join some clubs myself, take up some new hobbies, and then maybe I'll make some new friends or I'll see some of my friends there. So first of all, he saw an advert for a salsa class, the village hall. He thought, oh, lovely, I like salsa. So he went down there on the Monday evening. Fortunately, it was a bit embarrassing because he turned up with a big bucket of tomatoes and an apron because he thought they were making tomato salsa. But of course, it was a salsa dance class. Well, Mr. Helpful, he's no good at dancing. He got through it best as he could, but he thought, well, I'm not going back there again. That was just embarrassing. So then he thought, well, I'll go with Mr. Quiet to the reading group. That will be all right. I can go there. But they were reading, the weeks he went there, they were reading horror stories, really scary stories. And Mr. Helpful really doesn't like those kind of stories. He couldn't sleep every night he went there. And he thought, I can't carry on with this. I'll be exhausted. So he thought, well, maybe I'll go and do something a little bit more adventurous. I'll go down to the lake and see if they've got any water sports. So they were signing people up for paddleboarding. Marvellous. He said, I'll sign up for that. But that didn't work either, because if you go paddleboarding, you have to start on your knees. Well, Mr. Men, they've only got tiny little legs. They can't kneel down. So he had to go straight into the standing up paddleboarding, and it was a disaster. He just kept falling in, going around in circles. So he had to give that up as well. Oh, Jenny, he was very sad. He was walking up through the park after his paddleboarding, thinking, oh, this is useless. Thankfully, he bumped into Mr. Happy. Now, Mr. Happy is lovely, as you know, and he always notices if somebody needs cheering up. He said, what's the matter, Mr. Helpful? So they sat on a bench, and Mr. Helpful explained. He said, all my friends are busy, and all the clubs I've tried to join are no good, but it doesn't matter. I've reconciled myself to the fact that I'm just not suited to belong to any clubs or any societies. I'm just going to have to be a bit of a loner. And Mr. Happy looked at him and he said, what are you talking about? You are in one of the greatest clubs there are. Mr. Helpful said, I am. You're a Mr. Man, aren't you? Yes, said Mr. Helpful. Well, there you are. You are in the Mr. Man Club. It's one of the finest clubs there are. And you being Mr. Helpful, you're actually one of our very best members because you want to help people all the time. Do you remember, Mr. Helpful, he said, do you remember a couple of years ago when those two young upstarts arrived in the town, Mr. Rave and Mr. Hip Hop? We were all very suspicious of them, but you were right down in their house, you were in their garden with your headphones on, listening to their music. Well, said Mr. Helpful, I didn't want them to feel left out or like they weren't welcomed. Exactly, said Mr. Happy. And then last year, when Mr. Digital and his family arrived, I helped them move in, said Mr. Helpful. They needed lots of electrical sockets. Well, and you were just the person to help them, Mr. Helpful, weren't you? And Mr. Happy made Mr. Helpful realise that actually he was already part of a really amazing club of Mr. Men. And he went home that evening feeling a lot happier. Now, the message here, which I hope you've gathered, is that we are all also part of an amazing club. We don't call it a club, we call it family, a church family, or a church community. But we're all part of that club if we believe in Jesus and we commit our lives to following him. So we have an amazing, privileged position in the most amazing club that we could ever be part of. Whether we think of that in terms of this church family here in Worle, or the wider church community, or even the whole Christian community in the world, we are all part of that amazing club that we should be very proud of. And the really special thing about our club, of course, it's not just for this world, it's for eternity.
During lockdown, on a Sunday evening, we would do Compline, as some of you joined, or you would have had a link, and we thought that it would be a nice thing to do, because it's really nice to be able to pray together. So there's some stuff going up on the screen. If it's in red, we say it together. If it's black, you still say it if you want. But we'll lead through it. So stand, sit, kneel, do whatever you want, but just kind of spend this time to just rest ourselves before God.
Heavenly Father, you are always prepared and keeping watch, and knowing this brings comforts even on the darkest of days. Even when it seems that others do not think of me or wish me well, you are there, providing and caring for me. When I feel down, you remind me of your love. If I'd just look, I'd see my life has such goodness and blessing. May I always be able to identify kindness and goodness in life, and forever be in the presence of you, the Good Shepherd.
The Lord is my shepherd.
I shall not.
He makes me lie down in green pastures.
He leads me beside quiet waters.
He refreshes my soul.
He guides me along the right path.
Even though I walk through the darkest valley,
I will fear no evil. You are with me. Your rod, staff.
you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
The Lord is merciful and compassionate, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. The Lord is good to everyone. He showers compassion on all his creation. All of your works will thank you, Lord, and your faithful followers will praise you.
Creator God, send your Holy Spirit to renew this living world, that the whole creation in its groaning and striving may know your loving purpose and come to reflect your glory. In Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen.
Blessed be your name in the land that is plentiful, where the streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name when I'm found in the desert place. Though I walk through the Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be your name when the sun's shining down on me, when the world's all as it should be. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name on the road marked with suffering, though there's pain in the offering. Blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. You give and take away. You give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. You give and take away. You give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name.
And verse 27 to 29, Peter says, he's talking to Jesus, and he says, we have left everything to follow you. What then will there be for us? It's a great question. And I expect that the other disciples were thinking, oh my goodness, why has he asked that? But in the back of their mind, they were probably thinking, what's in it for me? And Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or fathers or mother or wife or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. And the title for today is, does discipleship pay? And the answer I would give you is yes. Thank you, Ian. We've been practicing that for the last fortnight. It's very difficult to do on Zoom, but it came off all right. It does pay, and for the reasons that Jesus gave in his reply. I remember as a youngster that I was one of five, and we were of the fervent belief that the only reason my mum had 5 children was because there were 5 rooms in the house that needed cleaning every Saturday. And there was a rota, and you just did not want to get the bathroom because that was, do you remember the Ajax powder? it would just never go away, would it? And I used to, obviously being the youngest and being the favourite, I used to play on this. So whenever my name appeared on either the kitchen or the bathroom, I used to say, "Oh, Mum, I don't feel very well." And my mum's reply was always, "There'll be a jewel in your crown when you get to heaven, son." And that's kind of what Jesus is saying here, that the reward is in heaven. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Peter asked the question in simplicity, naivety, and honesty, "What's in it for me?" And Jesus replies, "It's eternal life." But you know, you look at the title, "Does Discipleship Pay?" I think we need to fully understand what is discipleship. What does it mean to be a disciple or follower of Jesus Christ? And having spent some time looking at this, there's one word that I think for me summed it up, and that was obedience. Being a follower of Jesus Christ is being obedient to the call of Christ on your life and responding to it. And it's interesting, when you look at the call of the disciples, I think this bears it up. And in Matthew chapter 9, Jesus saw Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. And he says two words, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed him. "Follow me," and he got up and followed him. And in Matthew 4, we have the call of Peter. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. They were casting a net into the lake. They were in the process of doing their job. And Jesus says, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." And after 3 months, they left the nets and followed him. Absolutely not. It says, at once, they left the nets and followed him. And there's two things that jumped out at me when I was looking at this. And just to repeat again what I've said just about every time I've stood here, I am not a preacher. I just pass on things that have spoken to me, and you do with it what you will. So I am not preaching to anybody, anyone in particular. I'm telling you how this spoke to me. Two things. They didn't tie up their loose ends. They didn't wait for things to be sorted out. They got up and they left them behind. For us to be disciples of Jesus Christ, for us to follow him, to make that decision that we will follow the Lord wherever he leads, we have to leave stuff behind. We cannot continue on the path that we were going. That is hypocrisy. And that's very difficult to do. But that's obedience. Matthew with his tax money, Peter and Andrew, they left their nets. They left them behind. That was past. They were going in a new direction where their priorities, although they might not have been aware of it at the time, and they probably weren't, their priorities had changed. Being a disciple of, or a follower of the Lord is just not changing a few things here and there as we see fit. It's a radical transformation. It's a different way of life. It's a complete turnaround. And for some, as we'll see a little bit later on, it was a cost too much to bear. For those of us who have made a commitment to God, there has to be a change. And Matthew again tells us that no man can serve two masters. If the things we say, the language we use, the places that we go, the people we spend time with do not edify our walk with God, we ought not to be doing them. And the other thing that came out to me, and I knew it, but it was a little bit sobering. It was an individual choice. It wasn't a group booking. There wasn't like Jesus called the 12 together. Peter and Andrew came together, but they made individual choices. Matthew made that individual choice. They had to make those decisions themselves. And those of us who have friends, family, loved ones, acquaintances that we want to see in the kingdom would really love to make that choice for them. But we are not the decision makers for them. It has to be their own individual response. And back in 1973, I was 7. And in the evening service, a dear chap who's no longer with us, a guy called Danny James, was speaking, and he was telling this story about him going to college, and as he closed the front door, he shouted back to his mum, "I'll see you tonight." And as he was sat on the bus going to college in Swansea, he thought, what if I don't get home? Where am I going to spend eternity? And that was his message. I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. I thought maybe he'd missed the bus or something. On the Monday night, as I say, one of 5, we were sat around the table, and as we did after dinner, you'd sort of have a conversation. My brother and I, that shared a bedroom, were in big trouble because we had been playing with our cars instead of going to sleep when we should have gone to sleep. So my dad was telling us off, and no wonder you're tired because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And my dad said to my sister Becky, "And what's your excuse?" Because she must have been yawning. And Becky said, "I couldn't sleep because I gave my heart to Jesus." What? And so this conversation ensued, and I said to my dad, "Look, what did Danny mean by he wouldn't be going home, and where would he spend eternity?" And my dad explained it. My next brother up to the one I shared room with, after we had this big conversation and this expounding of what Danny was talking about, Tim went upstairs kneeled by his bed and asked Jesus into his heart. 5 minutes later, I did exactly the same thing. And I often think, as a parent myself, my parents must have been ecstatic. I mean, to have three of your children in the space of 24 hours accepting Jesus into their heart. What's my point? We did it in a very short period of time, all of us. But it was individual. Becky couldn't have got me into the kingdom. I couldn't have done it for anybody else. It was individual choice. But actually, Rebecca talking about what she did prompted that conversation. Thankfully, and Chris knows Rebecca, don't you? Yeah, she's not a shy girl anyway, but individual choices. Let's look at some people who wanted or were asked to follow the Lord, but couldn't. And Luke 9, verse 57, as they were walking along the road, a man said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. Isn't that fabulous? So far, so good. I will follow you wherever you go. Complete obedience, complete commitment. And Jesus replied, foxes have dens and birds have the nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to place his head. And that might sound like a prayer that we would raise up to Jesus. Lord, take control of my life. I will do whatever you ask me to do. And in fact, what Jesus is saying is, will you give up everything for me? And Jesus, as we know, had no material possessions. He had no home. He had no comforts. And he lets the man know about the potential cost of saying those words, I will follow you wherever you go. And this was from Jesus, who was born in a borrowed manger and was laid to rest in a borrowed tomb. He had absolutely nothing. And I don't believe that Jesus asks us to give up everything, but it's that attitude of mind, isn't it? That we would, if called. He reminds us that following him requires sacrifice. In verse 59, he said to another man, follow me. And he replied, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. And we might think that's really harsh. The man wants to just bury his father and then he's going to be right. But we're not told that his father was dead. And what that spoke to me about was obstacles. Putting obstacles in the way. The time's not right for me now. I've got things to do. Don't you know that, there's this that's going to come to fruition very soon. And then once that's done, I'm right with you, God. It's not part of being a disciple to put obstacles in the way. The time when Christ calls us, the time is the right time. And then in back to Matthew chapter 19. Then a man came up to Jesus and asked him, Teacher, What good thing must I do to get eternal life? Why do you ask me about what is good? Jesus replied. There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments. Plural. Keep the commandments. Which ones? He inquired. Jesus replied, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, all of these I've kept. What do I still lack? And Jesus answered, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. When the young man heard this, he went away sad, because he had great wealth. He had done everything he could. But to give up his money, that's just a little bit too much. And for us, it might not be money, it might not be wealth. And I don't believe that having wealth goes against God's plan. James chapter 2 says, if your brother's in need and you have the wherewithal to sort it out, well then sort it out. So somebody has to have something to be able to help somebody else. I don't think that's the issue here. It's when our possessions become more important and put up a barrier to following Jesus. And it may not be wealth, it may be possessions, and it may be relationships. It may be aspects of our life or behaviors that we will not let go of. But then we can't say, I will follow you wherever you go, if we hold on to things. As we've said right at the outset, to be disciples of the Lord, it means total surrender to God's will. To hold on is to hold out, and that is not obedience. And looking at our text, the verses that we read, what Jesus is talking about when Peter says, what's in it for me? Does discipleship pay? What Jesus lists down it talks about closeness with him, about sitting at his right hand. It's about relationship. And yes, it's about eternal life. But it's about our relationship with God now. And it's about obedience. And Chris is going to read a few verses for us. No, thank you, Chris.
14 to 21. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen.
Thanks, Chris. You might say, well, what's that got to do with discipleship? Well, it is a bit of a shoehorn in there because I say I came across it. I knew Ephesians chapter 3 existed, but a few weeks ago I came across this passage, and it struck a chord. How wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. And I fervently believe, and I say it to myself, I fervently believe that if we truly understood the extent of God's love for us, the agony that he went through, the humiliation that he went through, the separation that we went through. You know, when Peter denied Christ, that must have hurt as much as the crown of thorns. Because this was somebody who had dedicated his life. And I'm sure Jesus didn't have favorites, but I'm sure he had a bit of a soft spot for Peter. And so when Christ knew that Peter had denied him, that must have hurt. And maybe we do it far more than we think. But if we grasped just how much the love of Christ was towards each and every one of us when we didn't deserve it, we'd probably be better disciples than what we are. You don't get to be a disciple of Jesus on your own strength. It's being rooted, and that's the depth from what we read in Ephesians. It's being established, and that's the strength. May have the power, what does it say? Together. That's community. That's why we need to care for each other, because we grow together. We need to be careful. So to summarize, discipleship is obedience to God's word and the plan for our lives. The strength comes from being together in harmony, after grasping what a debt of love we owe our Lord, who gave his life because he loved us. He loved you. He loved me so much. Isn't this a Lord worth following? Salvation is free. Following cost, but ultimately discipleship pays. And I wasn't as short as I thought. May God bless us and help us to grow in him. Shall we just pray together before we get some more songs? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love for us. Help us to understand afresh, again, daily, the extent of your love. Father, we thank you that you speak to us through your word, your living word. And should there have been anything said this morning that will only hinder and obstruct your voice from being heard, let it not be about the speaker, but about the Lord who speaks to us individually. Just pray, take any hindrance away, and let us hear what we need to hear from you. I thank you for the way that you speak to us. May we be good disciples, good followers of you. Uphold your name at all times and bring glory and honor to you. May the Lord bless us and keep us. May he cause his face to shine upon us and give us peace in abundance, harmony in abundance, togetherness in abundance, support in abundance, encouragement in abundance. May your name be glorified now and forevermore. Amen. Said in half an hour, I'd say we should have had you instead.
My baptismal day was January the 24th, 1954, which wasn't yesterday. I remember though what was said that day. It was about Peter being concerned about other people rather than himself. That is, that in the end of John's Gospel, there's the meeting on the lake, and Peter's called to 3 times to follow Jesus. Calls him 3 times again. You make sure you follow me. And Peter says, what about this guy over there? And the Lord says, you make sure you're right with me first. Ultimately, the concern for the other people is mine.
Right, we're going to do take up the offering as we sing the song. Hide now. Hide. as we go out into this week, may the words of our mouths and the dedications of our hearts be always pleasing in your sight, our Lord and our Redeemer. Amen.